Television Network.
Africa's workforce set to overtake Asia by end of the 21st century. Africa's largest wind power project opens in northern Kenya. And Sudanese women want equal leadership rights in new government. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Penina Karibia. Also coming up tonight. Cashew entrepreneurs are trying to unlock local processing potential in Cote d'Ivoire. And Algeria beat Senegal to be crowned winners of the 2019 edition of the Africa Cup of Nations. We begin with a look at the African continent as a whole. By the end of the 21st century, Africa's potential workforce will likely be larger than that of Asia, according to a Bloomberg analysis of the UN's population data. Both continents will wrestle with different demographic and economic challenges. Asia will be confronted by an aging population, while the shift in Africa will be towards more youth joining the labor market. However, it's not clear whether African nations will be able to provide enough employment opportunities for young job seekers. In addition, it's not clear whether these potential employees will have the necessary skills that future jobs require. Here in Kenya, the government has formally launched Africa's biggest wind power plant. This scheme, that cost about $680 million, already provides nearly a fifth of the country's energy needs. And as CGTN's Astatal reports, this is the largest in Kenya's history.
365 wind turbines stand on the eastern shores of Lake Turkana. The wind farm is delivering 310 megawatts of renewable power to the national grid of East Africa's most dynamic economy. Despite being beset with delays and taking nearly a decade to rise from the arid landscape 600 kilometers north of Nairobi, the Lake Turkana Wind Project is the largest private investment in Kenya's history.
Today, we again raise the bar for the continent as we unveil Africa's single largest wind farm, the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project.
The turbines, scattered across Turkana's stark lunar landscape and rocky hills, began delivering electricity last September. Their giant blades deliver 15% of Kenya's entire installed capacity and are connected to the national grid through a 428-kilometer power line.
This monumental project, comprising 365 wind turbines of 850 kilowatts each, with a total installed capacity of 310 megawatts.
It is euphoric. You start what was a dream, putting together the largest private sector investment in a country's history that comprises the largest wind farm on the continent, in an area that is what you see here. And finally, you are able to generate and produce the power.
The nearly 50-meter turbines were engineered to handle the fierce gusts that tear through the Turkana corridor, a wind tunnel that generates optimal conditions year-round. The project has been closely watched as a case study of investing in renewables in Africa, where demand for energy is soaring as economies grow and populations swell. Astatal, CGTN.
Meanwhile, in Sudan, the political agreement between civilian powers and the ruling military council has been considered a breakthrough. Analysts, however, warn that there are several issues that still need to be resolved for the transition to be successful. Most important is establishing trust between the civilians and the generals. CGTN's Adel Mahroui with more.
How significant is the political agreement between the Sudanese civilian powers and the military council?
The significance of the event lies in the fact that it puts the first step towards handling the transitional process in Sudan. As we all know, in the past weeks and months, there has been disagreements and clashes over how the transitional period will be handled between the protesters on one side and the army on the other. So now we have a specific council, specific entity that's governing the country transitionally And accordingly, in the coming days and coming weeks, they will have a chance to discuss the rest of the details of the transitional period in a calmer condition.
It has been dubbed as a power-sharing agreement. But did the protesters and the civil powers get what they've been calling for?
On the short run, yes, no doubt. The main demand previously has been a transitional council that is equally divided between them and the army. This is what happened. Now they have even more representation than the army. They have 6 representatives, while the army has only 5. This, I think, for them, this is great. But there are a number of issues that has been in context between both of them, including the investigation over the crackdown on the protesters, the constitution, how the political system will take shape and its dynamics in the coming years. Those issues are still debatable, and as time moves on, I think we will see more clashes, more political clashes over them between both parties to the crisis.
One of the main points agreed upon was a constitutional declaration that should have been announced on Friday, but it has been postponed. What other challenges do you think lie ahead to complete this transitional period?
I think one of the main issues would be the nature of the civilian-military relationships in the post-transitional period. One of the issues they had a disagreement about was the investigation over the crackdown of the military. This shows that still both sides need to build some trust measures between them in order to handle this process. And without this prerequisite, I believe, it would be hard to discuss any other thing, whether the constitution, whether who would govern, whether any other social, political, or economic issue. So I think trust comes first, and then anything else would naturally come in place. It's very hard for any of them to dominate the scene. Each one of them has his own say. So I think, of course, the military has its own input to put in the process, and also the protesters. And on that basis, it's hard to argue that the military will just watch everything that's happening without interfering, or at least giving a set of recommendations. Instead, they will sit together and talk and find out a solution to every and each small detail.
About 4 protesters have died of gunshot wounds suffered in clashes between Ethiopian security forces and activists. This is following the fight for a new autonomous region for the Sidama ethnic group based in the southern city of Hawassa. CGTN's Girum Chala reports.
The last few days were rather agonizing in one of Ethiopia's bustling cities, Hawassa. The city was the one place Sidama activists threatened to form a regional state out of the southern Ethiopian nations and nationalities' regional government. Security personnel, including the special force of the Ethiopian army, have been fully engaged and managed to control the situation. But not without a cost. 4 people were reported dead, 3 male and 1 woman. Sources, including police in the city and hospitals, have confirmed this number. Cause of death for the protesters is confrontation with the army's security. The situation in the southern Ethiopian city of Hawassa is now calm, and we have heard daily activities are returning to normalcy. Sidama activists and party leaders have also announced delaying the formation of their new regional government. They said they will follow the constitutional procedure. The government and the Ethiopian Electoral Board have asked the protesters to respect the law and wait for a referendum which should take place in about 5 months' time. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up after the break. Cashew entrepreneurs are trying to unlock local processing potential in Cote d'Ivoire. And Sudanese women want equal leadership rights in new governments.
Africa, the most iconic wildlife destination in the world. Its unique ecosystems were formed over countless eons. Many people can only dream of visiting this natural paradise. But now, for the first time ever, CGTN Wild Wonderland live show is bringing Africa to you through all of our online platforms. 14 episodes from July 22nd to 28th take you to adventure through the Great Plains of Kenya's Masai Mara, the Serengeti in Tanzania, and the Greater Kruger Park in South Africa. Welcome aboard the wildest ride of a lifetime. This is Wild Wonderland live show, only on CGTN.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
The Tunisian premier has declared that the refugee and migrant issue is not for Tunisia to bear alone. He added that all relevant countries must also shoulder the responsibility. Tunisia has launched a new strategy to counter the flow of migrants. An average of 50 undocumented African migrants are saved every day by Tunisian coast guards, while others drown at sea.
Interior Minister Hisham Fourati announced the setting up of a new security plan to counter irregular migration, following the dramatic shipwreck of a boat boarding undocumented migrants off Sfax and Zazis.
The situation is alarming. It requires a reaction from the state as the number of illegal crossing attempts and undocumented migrants increase. Every day, irregular migration is causing human tragedies.
At least 150 undocumented migrants have recently drowned in several incidents in the Mediterranean while crossing from Libya to Italy, heading to Italy's Lampedusa.
It is unfortunate to see the increasing number of victims. We'll provide all legal and logistical means to reduce the phenomenon, but Tunisia cannot do it without assistance from its partners in the Mediterranean basin.
Authorities say that over 2,730 irregular migration attempts had been thwarted recently, and the smugglers involved in the organization of some death crossings were identified and arrested.
Irregular migration is a shared responsibility. Arresting some smugglers will not stop the wave of migrants. Hundreds of African migrants drown at large. Over 1,500 went missing this summer.
According to the Tunisian Forum for Economic and Social Rights, 4,128 persons had been arrested for having tried to illegally cross to Italy in 2019. According to the Interior Ministry, several attempts at illegal crossing of maritime borders were foiled this week by the coast guards of the governorates of Sfax, Mednin, Mehdiya and Bizerta. Over 90 individuals of different African nationalities were arrested aboard a boat. 20 women and 2 children were transferred to the Red Crescent centers. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Côte d'Ivoire is the world's largest producer of cashews, but the nut is mainly exported in its raw form. Ivorian entrepreneurs are trying to unlock local processing potential, but are facing a myriad of challenges. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has more.
Côte d'Ivoire is the world's largest grower of cashews, but only a small fraction is processed locally. 90% of the nuts are exported in their raw form to be processed and packaged abroad. Seeing an opportunity, entrepreneurs, most of whom are women, are creating locally made value-added products.
I turn cashews into chocolate-covered cashews, so-called cashews dragués. Until then, the cashew nut was known in the roasted form, simply salted, but I brought out a little more by coating it with chocolate.
Cashews are a major cash crop in Côte d'Ivoire, and is the country's third largest export. These nuts are an important source of rural income, especially for smallholder farmers and processors in the poorer northern part of the country.
The equipment is made by local inventors, but having no means, they cannot produce them in large quantities to allow for industrial-scale processing. Processing cashew nuts in a traditional way cannot compete with foreign processing plants. But if we have adequate equipment, with the abundant raw material and labor available, we could produce enough to meet the demand.
Dosso Mama has recently traveled to China to participate in the first China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo held in Hunan province. She's been looking for partners who can help her unlock Côte d'Ivoire's local processing potential.
What I am proposing to help promote local consumption is that the government partners with private actors so that together we can find ways to subsidize the processing industry. This would be very beneficial for us producers as well as for local consumers.
Another untapped market for cashew nuts is the one at home.
The costs associated with processing are enormous. It is impossible for us as private processors to sell at prices suitable for the average Ivorian citizen's purse. Yet it's a big potential market share to conquer.
According to the World Bank, the European and North American markets for cashew nuts are expected to continue to grow. Consumer tastes are changing and they are demanding healthier snacking options. Despite the challenges, local entrepreneurs are still hoping to cash in on cashews. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
In Sudan, women are calling for change and equality in the country's leadership. A group of activists are calling on Sudan's military and opposition leaders to open the country's political process to women when the sides begin to implement their recent power-sharing deal. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa with the details.
Women have been at the forefront of the revolt, which led to Bashir's overthrow by the military on April 11th after 3 decades of iron-fisted rule. Many of them recall suffering a series of interrogations, detention, and torture for speaking their minds out.
I was taken to Shendi Station, which used to be called the Fridge. It was a very long building. The room I stayed in measured around 6 meters by 4 meters. There was a TV that only had one channel, and it was Sudan TV. The rest of the place was empty.
The Fridge is part of a detention center run by the all-powerful National Intelligence and Security Service, popularly known as the NISS. Dozens of activists and political opponents of Bashir's regime have passed through what NISS agents cynically refer to as the hotel. Women activists claim that for a long time, women had no say in Sudan.
As a Sudanese culture, if you just randomized study here, you will find most of the women or the girls from the secondary or the primary school, they either get married or just stay at home. In the same family, you can find that the son is supported to be educated and they give him everything, facilitate that. But the women no, because they see that at the end we will just get married and that is the end. So we as a new graduation or new generation, we need to give a new idea for the woman because at the end, woman is a human being. She have her own family, has own views, and marriage is just part of the life.
For most of Sudan's 63 years as an independent country, women were not allowed to get involved in politics due to cultural norms and other restrictions.
I strongly believe that because you can see that here in Sudan as daily life, that there's a lot of inequality that happens because the lack of confidence and education from the side of women, they get suppressed a lot. So I believe that coming to a place like this will enlighten them so they can become better and maybe challenge men a little bit.
The proposed power-sharing deal between the Transitional Military Council and the opposition stipulates that women should hold at least 40% of the country's national legislative seats. Sudanese women activists say they will use this opportunity to have their voices heard. Bulkisanyabo, CGTN.
South Africans joined hands in honor of their former president, Nelson Mandela. Mandela Day was first observed in 2010 and has become an annual celebration. A group of children also wanting to contribute to the big day turned a Johannesburg shopping centre into an art gallery with their Mandela Day work. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Nelson Mandela's face pieced together with tiny magazine cuttings. One of 300 works of art done by children from the Kailami Schools group in Johannesburg to show their love for the global icon.
Nelson Mandela was a very good man. He was a very kind man, and he was very special to me.
He wanted the best, but he never got the best. So he wanted to make a difference for all the other children in this world.
Mandela believed that children are the greatest asset to a country, and educating them was the most powerful tool.
We did the hands to say thank you to Nelson Mandela, to show him that we appreciate everything he did for us. He sacrificed everything for us. He went to jail for all of us, and he fought for freedom so we can all be equal.
He was stuck in prison for 27 years, and what I like about him is that he forgave all those people that put him in prison.
The exhibition raises awareness around children suffering with cancer. It also highlights the importance of community service.
For us, it's to raise awareness around charity, around giving back, and around everything that Nelson Mandela stood for. The idea is to make this an annual event and to grow on it and to support various charities through the work that we do here.
Some grasp the importance of Mandela Day.
I think it's important to follow his footsteps because he made some important decisions that essentially shaped the future that his generation had to live in. And I think we need to do the same because we need to start shaping our future for ourselves.
Others rolled up their sleeves and let their imagination run wild.
We chose the cow because in many Zulu cultures, they kill a cow when they get married. We paper machéed it, and then we took, I think it was metal?
Yeah,
metal strips, yeah. And then we paper machéed it, and then we painted it.
Children had a special place in Mandela's heart, and this exhibition is about preserving his legacy among younger generations. Judy Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports, we'll bring you the latest as Algeria are crowned champions of Africa.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We begin in Egypt, where Algeria has won the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations after beating Senegal by a solitary goal in a tense final played in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. An early goal by Baghdad Bouneja tamed the Lions of Teranga to give Algerians their first Afcon title since 1990. CGTN Sadiq Shaban watched this one for us.
It was the most anticipated final, having been in the making for 2.5 years. Egyptian football fans returned to the stadium in numbers, their best attendance since the hosts were knocked out of the tournament.
Senegal. Sadio Mane, hat-trick, 3-0, win the cup. Ballon d'Or. Thank you very much.
But Algerians flew into Egypt in their thousands, ready for what promised to be a battle royale against Senegal. And no sooner had football fans settled in for the match than the desert foxes of Algeria stunned the Lions of Teranga. A swift kick by striker Begdad Benouja found the back of the net for Algeria in the second minute of the game. Senegal had a couple of chances to equalize, but they failed to convert the opportunities throughout the match. And the tie ended in favor of Algeria 1-0 as the North Africans won their first title in 29 years.
It's a complicated match. We scored quickly and we started coming back and defend. The essential is that we are the African champions after 29 years. It's unbelievable, especially African champions outside the country. The last one was in Algeria in 1990. African champion away is extraordinary. Big thanks to Jamel Belmadi. He deserves all the praise. He took us here and he did a lot. So true, we are the actors, but he did a lot for this team.
Algeria won the cup, but we deserved at least scoring a goal or making a draw and take the Algerian team far in this game. The thing we retain is the defeat in a final match. They deserve the African Cup, and they deserve it, but we know our strength also.
Thousands of Algerian fans celebrated their team's victory in Egypt, Algeria and around the world as the reality of winning sank in.
That's not all. We will win the World Cup. We will.
They made us happy, and they made all the Algerian people happy. It was the time for celebrating. We are so happy.
For the West Africans, it was another long wait for Senegal as they finished runners-up again for the second time in 17 years. Algeria was the best team of the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. They went undefeated in the tournament, winning 6 matches, drawing only once and scoring 13 goals. An impressive performance worthy of an expanded 24-nation tournament and their first Afcon title since 1990. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN in Cairo, Egypt.
Juventus coach Maurizio Sarri claims he is a fan of Manchester United midfielder Paul Pogba, but he does not know if the Frenchman would be leaving England to join the Serie A champions. Pogba's agent recently told the media that the 26-year-old intends to leave the Premier League club. The player also said while in Tokyo last month, he was seeking a new challenge elsewhere amid reports linking him to Juventus and Real Madrid. Pogba, who joined United from Juventus in 2016, has blown hot and cold in his second stint at the club, despite scoring 31 goals in 142 appearances.
I am not the technical director, I don't know. You have to ask to the director.
Would you like Paul Pogba to be playing for Juventus?
I like very much the player, but I don't know the situation, so I don't want to speak about a player of Manchester United, of course.
And that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platform. I'm Penina Karibe. Thank you for watching.